Hello, I'm Dr. Thunder, and this is Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. And this is going to be a good show. I'm going to spill some tea. Uh, uh, Maybe some real life stories involved in communicating these sort of shady business practices that you want to avoid. And I think this is going to be an important conversation if you're trying to uh, go fast, right? You can go it alone. If you want to go far, you have to go with other people. But it can't just be any old folks, and everybody doesn't have the same value system or the same idea of what's a success. Everybody doesn't value and appreciate each other's time in the same way. And so you have to steer clear of shady folks, and you don't want to be a victim. You don't want to be a victim of shady business practices. Now, this could be anywhere from, frankly, it could be anywhere from, um, people stiffing you for the bill, delaying payment, not returning your phone calls, juvenile stuff. Anywhere from that to, uh, you know, hatching entire plots with your demise as their central focus. And it can be anything from selfish manipulation. Somebody wants what they want when they want it, and they don't care how that tramples upon you, to, some sort of Machiavellian master plan. So you want to be aware. So, anyhow, we've got a great show for you today. So grab some popcorn and get ready for another riveting episode of Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. Let's go. Warning: some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. What's happening, everybody? How are we doing? What's happening, Ike? What's up?
I'm good. 000 showtime. I'm ready.
That's right. It is showtime. So,
Now, good little intro there. Talking about the different motives people might have for doing shady things, the means and the methods, and the
yeah.
opportunities that they might have for doing shady things. I'm sure it's not lost on you that this is very well almost like a continuation of the conversation. Well, it's within the realm of the conversation we had last week regarding ethical ambiguity, in which one of the aspects that's particularly relevant here is the idea of being ethically ambiguous without being morally compromised. And I guess you're
Right.
talking about people who have somehow morally, so we're going to explore the morally compromised side of things.
Well, and it's about it's sort of like it's about the impact that failing to successfully navigate that ethical ambiguity without trampling upon, without you know, while maintaining the golden rule, the do unto others as you'd have them to do unto you, sort of thing, right? And so this is exploring the sort of
Hmm.
impact it has, or the potential impact it would have on the people that get sort of chewed up by the machine because folks are not
Hmm.
successfully navigating that.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I can just start right in. I got dozens of stories. I'm a musician.
Yeah, it seems. Oh, wow. So let's perhaps begin there, and then you can get into it. And by
Yeah,
there, I
yeah,
mean you just gave a category of, like a class of people, and you
yeah.
said that. So professional reputations, is it true? I mean, musicians, for example, are they typically kind of a little bit late, a little bit unprofessional? Go ahead.
So there's a look. Um, I know a lot of artists, musicians, um, a ton, and we're not necessarily known for being the most organized, right, or the most schedule, you know, um, observant. uh, there's a lot of sort of, and especially it seems to be the case that if you're more unusual in your skill set, like if you do something that's in demand, that you're very good at it, then it seems like you can get away with more stuff, right? Um,
Mhm.
and if you're a star, for instance, you can sort of take advantage um, of people's desire to work with you because they think it'll be it'll be a hey, if I work with this artist or if I do this particular thing, this is going to be a big opportunity for me. And some of these big stars that you would expect when they come through town and they pick up musicians, they'll have the core band, which will be like a rhythm section and maybe a couple singers or whatever it is, folks that they tour with the group, and then they'll pick up additional horn players, maybe another guitar player,
Okay.
you know.
Some
Um,
hired guns, some mercenaries. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's right, some mercenaries. And you would think that those gigs would uniformly pay well. Now, so you could be talking about big stars, big names. I've played with Aretha Franklin and the Temptations and um, oh goodness, uh, it's a lot of folks. It's a lot of recognizable names, and those gigs don't always pay the same.
Mhm.
Some of those gigs will pay sort of union scale, or they'll try to match the union scale, even if it's not a union gig. And a lot of them will just basically, based on the name recognition of the artist, and peoples are so hungry and they're so thirsty for certain kinds of gigs and certain kinds of opportunities, and to even be able to say that they did such and such. You know, I played with Frankie Valley. I played with whatever. And I'm not saying those names to say that those gigs didn't pay well. I'm saying that you can take advantage of your sort of name recognition, and then the musicians that want to play with you, they're like, "Hey, I'm going to say yes regardless." And then you get to the gig and the gig pays $100, you know. And hey, I'm not sneezing at $100. $100 is $100, but maybe that gig really should have paid more like 750, right? Um so there's a lot of loose stuff that happens on all sides of this. And I mean, we just went through this pandemic, and I think that the pandemic really brought out the sort of worst in folks, in particular institutions. So, if you have a surplus of talent, so say for instance, churches lay off a bunch of musicians because, they're having a hard time even keeping their doors open. So then when churches start to hire back, there's a larger pool of folks for them to choose from. So then now they can be a little maybe less principled in the way that they conduct themselves and in the way that they treat those musicians, right? And they can probably pay them less, right? So rather than keeping up with what that job ought to pay, given that you've been paying folks the same amount for the last 10 years, and now you're trying to trim that, and it won't necessarily be because you can't afford it, but it's because you can do it. And people are going to say, you know what? If I say no, they're going to get somebody else in here, right?
Mhm.
And so you have to watch out for that kind of stuff. And really, the strongest thing that you can do is your willingness to say no, your willingness to walk away. You vote with your feet. You say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to take this treatment. And you can get somebody else in here if you want to, but it ain't going to be me, you know? So
That was the same.
go ahead.
It's similar to what we said last week about the price that you pay for not being a bean counter, right? So if you're gonna need to gird those loins and get yourself ready and make yourself, put yourself in a position where you're able to say. You don't want to make it harder for yourself to say no, right? Let me put it that way, right? Hence, you want to do everything that you can to make that choice the easier one, and then build your reputation on that. Yeah. So interesting.
Uh,
So
go ahead. Go ahead.
there's these agreements don't seem to exist a priori in these situations. You mentioned there's a lot of disorganization all the way through, and a lot of things,
Yep.
or the way you said it's things going wrong on all sides. Now, to show up at a gig and then to find out what it pays, as opposed to it being known up front, and maybe you perhaps one was in the fog of, oh yes, I'll go ahead and take the job anyways, as you said, because this is a big star and I can use it, name recognition and whatnot. So all this disorganization, uh, Is that something that one should watch out for in any particular? So
Yeah.
how do you
So
go navigating? Yeah.
yeah. So you want to know what the terms are. You want to dictate the terms, um, and you want to know if all of the details. How much of everything is covered? Is my travel covered? Is Am I getting mileage? Um, I have to bring extra instruments. Am I going to get bonus pay for bringing all these extra instruments when the other horn players or other people in the band don't have to bring as much stuff? Are they thinking about
Mhm.
that? Obviously, how much does the gig actually pay? How long is the rehearsal going to go? You know, um, you want to know all of that kind of stuff. Now, see, the thing is that if if you're talking about something that is um, has been around for a while, has been in operation for a while, they're going to know all of those details and going to be able to just spit those out. But if you're working on a project where people they have never done this, or they're just getting started, I worked on a project. It's kind of like a musical dance kind of thing, and it was an original project. And I worked with the creator of the project, who was also the director, and like this. And and we worked together over like several months, getting all the music together. I did all of these edits, and I did all the stuff. And I negotiated what the terms were going to be in the beginning. Um, and I said, okay, there's going to be a deposit. You're going to give me the deposit, and then we'll work together. We'll meet as often, we'll meet once a week. And I tried to dictate what the rhythm was going to be of our interaction. And so that they weren't expecting that they were going to just own me for 3 months, because I have
Mhm.
stuff to do. I can't just be doing this. I am giving you a percentage of my time. I'm not giving you all of my time, 100% of my attention. You know, no matter what time of day you want to call me, you can call me in the middle of the night. You can do this. No, that's not what you're getting. What you're getting is, here are the things, here are the terms, here are the things that I'm going to provide for you. And of course, uh, you still have the freedom to, you can be flexible. You know, you can decide that you want to do more than you dictated, but by establishing the parameter, you protect yourself from getting screwed over. Because people, the nature of people, and this is not even, we're not even necessarily talking about folks that want to do you wrong. It could be people that they just haven't done this, so they have no idea what's going to happen. So they're just going to keep asking you to do more and more stuff, right? And they're holding the bag. So it's like, you're like, well, and it's lucrative enough for you to be like, yeah, I kind of want that 2 grand. So, okay, if they're telling me to do a few extra things, that's not a big deal. But then it starts to pile up. And so you have to, so it kind of protects both parties, right? And I like to always I want to do a good job, and I want to do and deliver more than I said I was going to deliver, right?
Mhm.
That's just something that I want to do. And I feel better about it. The client always feels good about it, and it just works out better. Everybody is served better. And then there's no question, when they want to do the same kind of project again, they're going to call me first,
Mhm.
you know? And then if I feel like, hey, well, this was a bit more of a time commitment than I had previously um thought it was going to be. The last time we did it, I kind of spent a little bit more time, and I did a few other things, and I'm cool with doing those things. Um, ask for a little bit more money, and because you have a good relationship, because you did a good job, it's not a problem, right?
Mhm.
But but I'll tell you, and that was a really great experience because we understood each other, and it was very clear lines of communication. And she told me exactly. She was direct with me, saying what it was that she wanted, and I delivered exactly what it was that she said she wanted, and then some. So no problem. Now, let me tell you about let me tell you about something that didn't go well, and um, in a matter of fact, it's something that I cut off before it actually got going because I could tell that it was not going to be good. Okay, and so this client, potential client, contacted me through a reference through uh, you know some other music situation position that I had, and people said positive things about me, so it was a good referral. And she was kind of the client was kind of all over the place with what they wanted, and so there was uh, there was a lot of communication and like way too much information that was thrown in a variety of different ways to communicate: phone calls, text messages, voice voice notes on a phone, PDF sent through to a phone, um, uh, email thread, multiple email threads, and the stuff was kind of all over the place. But I was like, okay, I have a finite window that I can do this project. If we get beyond that finite window, then we're going to have a challenge. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
so they decided that they wanted to basically do some other stuff that I don't usually do, an approach to doing this project. And from the sort of strangeness of certain aspects of the communication, and I could tell that this person basically wanted to monopolize my time for whatever the window of time was. So
Mm-hmm.
if we said the this project is going to take place over a month of time, then they were expecting me to basically drop everything else and only do that. Now I communicated that that is not something that I can do or that I ever would do, and the price that I quoted was such that nobody in their right mind would actually expect that you would that you would drop everything for it. But I could tell it was not going to be a good situation. And so before it began, I ended it. I said, I don't think this is going to happen. I was cordial, polite. I was direct in what, of course, they were upset because I wasn't going to do the project anymore. But
Mm-hmm.
it's better, it's better sometimes to just say, hey, it's not worth it. You can keep your, you keep your dollars. You keep your few dollars. I don't, you know. Now here's here. Now let me say this: you cannot walk away if you need the money, right? So you're stuck. So you have to kind of deal with people's phoniness. So you have to get yourself in a situation so that you can dictate the terms because you don't need the money. I don't really need to do this project. I'm all right if I don't do this project. I would like to do this project. I like doing projects like this, creative projects. That's great. But I don't have to do this. And as soon as I get a sense that this is not going to be the sort of terms in the sort of working situation that's going to make me feel good about the project, where I can do my best work, then I'm not going to do it.
Mm. Now, it's quite interesting. So this person sending information all over the place. You can see a certain kind of maybe scatteredness and whatever. And you're like, okay, it's all good. And then you could sense that they were gonna try to monopolize your time. Now, it is the case that perhaps they get away with it in certain, so probably the nature of the music industry and with the arts in general is they could probably get away with it with more people than not.
Oh yeah,
Like they probably
I don't
wouldn't
doubt that. I
last
don't
very
doubt.
long trying to do this with lawyers.
Yep, I don't doubt that she'll be able to find that they'll be able to find somebody else that will deal with the way that she wants to work. But that is just not the way that I want to work. And um, now, granted, uh, if it's anybody that can do the kind of stuff that I can do, then they're probably going to charge her a lot more than I was going to charge her. See,
Mhm,
part of the benefit of me, uh, being a tenured professor, having income other places, is that I don't really need the money, right? So I can quote a rate that is worth me doing it, but it doesn't have to pay. It doesn't have to equate to 50% of my mortgage, or over the next 2 months, or it doesn't have to pay these bills plus these other bills and plus my car payment and this. See, it doesn't have to do that. It just basically it's just gravy, right?
mhm,
So um so I can afford to offer a rate at a lower, offer services at a lower rate, not because I'm trying to undercut anyone else. I'm not doing it for free, but it just works out. And I feel good about it. The client feels good about it. And then if there's some repeat work, I can get the repeat work, you know.
hmm. So we got one example from the music industry.
Yeah.
Continuing with that line of scatteredness and getting away with things, this type of non so before there was like a, oh, this is a handshake deal, right? Or there is still that notion, even though it's not something you should generally do in a formal setting of any kind, right?
Well,
Where
here. Let me give a few more details about this
okay.
particular thing that I said no to. Um, so I produced an invoice, and the invoice had details, and the deposit is the contract, right? That's the
Mhm,
that is a that's the way that I usually operate, right? So you have some evidence
mhm,
of what it is that's expected, and uh, and you have some range of time that the services are expected to happen over. You know, I need to deliver this product at this time. I need to offer this X, Y, and Z. Okay. Uh, but this client, uh, unusually litigious for this kind of project, wanted to have a um, wanted a what do you call it? Um, they wanted a contract. They wanted a legally binding contract.
yeah, so they wanted more elaborate terms and conditions.
That's right. And so I spelled out what those terms would be. They wanted me to be even more specific, but I said, look, if I'm more specific, then when we get to a place where uh, I'm actually going to do something more than what was dictated, or there's something arises that we don't know that's going to arise, then you're going to have to give me more money, right? Or I mean, it's not in the contract, so and I don't really want to be legalistic in about a creative project. I just want there to be general terms that we agree to, and that there's some sort of documentation of, but it doesn't need to be something that gets sent to an attorney. Okay. So anyhow,
Mhm,
they kept pressing it. So I said, okay. So I drafted a contract with all these details. They sent it to an attorney. The attorney changed a bunch of language, and Meanwhile, all of this other stuff is going on and all this communication and almost this expectation that I was supposed to work. I was supposed to be working even before uh, a contract had been signed or a deposit had been submitted. They kept sending me stuff. They were sending me all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'm not paying any attention to anything that you're sending me until something is signed, until the cash money's in my hand, right? And so anyhow, but the point is, based on that, and based on the interaction and some strange stuff that I sensed in our interaction on the phone, I could just tell that it was not going to be a good fit. I could tell that they were going to have expectations that I was going to be in the middle of the project, and then I was going to be thinking to myself, why the heck did I say yes? Why did I agree to this? This is not worth it. And as soon as I felt that way, I
Mhm.
was like, I'm done.
Now there's a lot to say. So there's this terms and conditions stuff, and the legal stuff, and the lawyer marking up stuff. That's one route I would like to go down a little bit more. But this reminds me of, when you're starting out, this is something that you might do to yourself. I'm talking about that feeling of, why did I take this on? Or just knowing that you're perhaps doing something where the demands are blah, blah, blah. But i-
Yeah.
if you're starting off and you decide that, hey, in order to get this contract, or in order to get the experience, or in order to really understand the scope of this particular type of work, what it entails, how long it actually takes. I don't have the experience in this field, but let me just go ahead and take this. And I know that I may be underbidding, or and such and such. Those are things, the kinds of things that you do earlier on, and obviously as you learn, and as you have those regrets of like, well, why the hell did I do this?
Well,
You
well,
move
well,
past
I
that,
already look.
but
By my
yeah.
estimation, all of the extra posturing, dragging feet, getting a lawyer involved, having me write an additional contract, sending me a bunch of stuff with the expectation that I was going to be looking at it. That was already that already was worth the money that I quoted. Okay, so I'm just saying, and we haven't even come to an agreement yet. So I was like, man, this is like, and look, I don't, I'm not, I don't mean to be. Look, um, it was an original song that I was going to produce, and the song was not really a song. So basically, I was going to be writing a song, orchestrating, producing the entire thing. So basically, creating something that didn't exist at all. Not even. Um, so that's basically what was going to happen. Um, and I was willing to do that, but if if I knew that it was going to be all of this other rigmarole, I would have at least quadrupled what it was that I said I'd do it for. 5, 6 times the amount or something.
Mhm.
Now, if it was 5 to 6 times the amount, okay, I can dealing with a difficult person. But if it was for the rate that it's like, dude, we haven't even got out the gate yet. We can't even get this basic stuff together. No, can't do it.
So one thing you said there was, well, earlier you said, if you need the money, then you can't say no. You mentioned that you need to put yourself in a position such that you can't say no to these kinds of things. And this is the fact that you said no before the thing started, or you didn't. You're not like in the middle of some big mess, and blah blah blah, and then you guys are arguing over legal stuff, and someone is getting sued. The fact that we were able to cut it off early is a huge deal. And it's not just a huge deal on an instance by instance basis. It's something that basically compounds on itself a lot. And in
Mm.
many different avenues, I always, we were talking about also towards the end of last week, and Kaiser brought up something about judgment. And I'm always like, I'm definitely a big proponent of judgment. Now, when I say judgment, generally I'm assuming that it's good judgment. I'm assuming that your perception is relatively clear, your faculties are clear, you're making sound decisions, right? All these other kinds of things, right? If you're if if you're out there just being wild, making crazy judges based on some crazy gut instinct, emotion, whatever, you got a separate set of problems. However, judgment, when those things that you know, there's no need to stick around doing the experiment and gathering more and more evidence and saying, oh, well, but what is the, there's a 20% chance that they may be a good person. It's like that 20% chance will give you like 100%, completely ruin your whole life, your whole business.
Yeah.
Cost you like a half a year of time, cost you crap load of income, right? And things like that. So cutting these things off early is a big deal. Now, terms and conditions. So you guys didn't really, it didn't get to the point where you guys have to had to. What do you recall any of the things that were marked up, right? By
Yeah.
the
Well,
lawyer, in terms of the lawyer scratching things out and changing things. In what area were they doing that?
well,
Um,
most of the stuff that was it was like some legalese that was added. Um,
okay.
my terms were adequate, and the deliverables and all of the specific and the framing of the specifics and the sort of um, giving up my any sort of rights to the song, to the intellectual property. So basically, I would be doing this project as a one-time payment, and there would be no um, royalties or anything. Which, you know, look, you never know what might hit big on the radio or something like this, but it's my general experience that folks don't have a good ability to judge if their own music is going to be a big hit or not. And being so litigious in the front side may seem like you're setting yourself up for a big payday later because now nobody else is in your pocket and like this. But what you also did was you prevented the song from being created um, by someone that has a certain level of expertise. So you
So
got you got your win in that if it hits, now you get 100% of it. But what's 100% of nothing?
you see, the compliance people, so the legal people and the accountants, often referred to by people in the sales side of the world as the sales prevention team. You just mentioned preventing a song from being written.
Right.
These people are also in the business of preventing things from happening in general. They prevent
Right.
sales from happening, they prevent things from getting done. Everything is seen as a risk. And
Yep.
somehow, because they're kind of removed from the where the money comes from, so the salesperson is there. Their job is to get money out of the ether, and they're judged on that money, right?
Mm.
The quota, they could get fired if they don't make it's you kill. I mean, you eat what you kill. The skill level of skin in the game with regards to salespeople when it comes to revenue and the importance of revenue is high. There's a lot of skin in the game. So you have these salespeople, they're out there, they're looking at this like, okay, there's a relationship that I'm developing. I'm looking to perhaps have many sales from these people in the future and grow it, get recommendations, so on and so forth. I'm not looking to screw them over, okay? Neither are they looking to screw me over. However, and I'm just talking about the legal team right now, okay, the sales prevention team, these lawyers and accountants. However, these people come in heavy-handed when it's a corporate type deal, heavy-handed with their words and their verbiage, and oh, these are all our legal reasons, and then these are our administrative reasons, right? So all kinds of things need to be stipulated. Oh, it says over here in your contract that we need 8 days notice. Well, we don't have a system. It becomes what they call an administrative or process. We don't have a process to give you 8 days notice, right? So we're going to cross that off and argue about that one for a week. Okay. And this tends to aggravate both the client who wants a job done or something sold to them. They're trying to solve a problem. That's why people spend money. Spending money to make a purchase to solve a problem. And you are in, you the salesperson or business owner or somebody who is right there, the tip of the spear with regards to pulling money out of the ether. You understand, okay, I'm not trying to screw you. I'm being upfront. Things happen in this business of the sort that we can anticipate. In other words, the uncertainty, the risk, right? You know that in the last hour, X, Y, and Z may happen. I also know that this may happen. Okay, cool. That we're all working in good faith. That's the term, right? Um, but the legal stuff I see a lot of times kind of messes things up. Now, from their perspective, no, because they're away from the money thing, because they're getting paid, right? They're getting paid to
Right.
just look at this as a contract. They're not looking at the balance sheet of the company or how
Right.
much you actually do need this sale or what this sale represents or in terms of relationships or your business they're not looking at any of that. Okay. They've got their salary, they got their coffee, and they're just looking at a contract. And they're gonna do some crazy things in that regard. Now, they're to steel man their position, they're trying to prevent all this kind of BS that may come up from the BS people in the world. But you, on the other end, you're like, but I'm able to judge BS, or I'm able to. This is Mr. X. I'm trying to get into this contract with. We have a certain rapport, and we understand what could not happen vis-a-vis what I just mentioned, the typical kinds of risks, right? But the question is, how do you bridge this gap then, Dr. Thunder? Right? There's the going overly litigious, which I see on the corporate side of things. You're dealing with people in data centers, and you're talking to AWS, right? Amazon Web Services, which is the majority of Amazon's profit. Some ridiculous amount of Amazon's profit is all in there. Not a big surprise because selling stuff is never high margin, right? But the web services and such is really high margin. So if you're dealing with Apple, Google, these people, the legalese and the sales prevention team gets really hot and heavy, and in this kind of a what is typically called a complex sale is about dealing with the compliance people and their very inhuman ways of looking at things. But how do you bridge the gap between, well, maybe it's not really bridging the gap, it's more like a happy medium somewhere, something that mediates the trust such that things don't have to be so finely and clearly stated. It's almost like we're going into a war. It's almost like it's a peace treaty, like we just fought a battle. It's like, dude, I'm trying to create a relationship with this person, and every line here says, "Don't screw me, don't screw me, don't screw me, don't screw me." Like it's like,
Yep.
anyways, that's my rant on compliance. And partially my personal kind of anecdote, albeit without any kind of detail at all, regarding dealing with these kinds of things and how they can screw up sales and relationships.
Yeah, and this is why um, I went for initially just a simple invoice with a few details and a due date. The deposit is the contract. There you go. That's all you need. And you're still dealing with each other based on trust, and really the invoice and the deposit only protect you if you're going to go to court for small claims, which most folks are not going to see that as being worth it, depending on um, the amount of money. So both parties there's significant risk. There's still some risk involved, right? But even if there's a detailed contract, there's still risk involved.
Mhm.
Because if you're not talking about that much money, I mean, who's going to spend the legal fee? So, for instance, if uh, say if you're doing some work for, I'm gonna, I'm gonna write a jingle for $150, and you don't deliver on the jingle, right? If they sue you, it's going to cost them more than $150 to sue you, and all they're going to get out of it is $150. you know,
Mhm.
so you have to kind of measure, like, look, you know, you kind of, if we're talking about a multi-million-dollar deal, right? If we're talking about maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars or something, then yes, let's be as litigious as we can be. Let's really stipulate every detail. But if you're talking about a one-off project, what are we doing? You sucked all of the creative life out of it. Now I don't want to deal with you. Now I don't want
Very
to
true.
deal with
Now,
you.
in a way,
Go
it
ahead.
goes back to a competence thing because a big part competence cuts across every layer of what we're talking about here, unless we're or then talking about just malice and the Machiavellian type of thing.
Right.
And by
Right.
competence, I mean either just being a scatterbrain or being incompetent with regards to inconsiderate. Right? You talked about people who are just inadvertently piling on, to what is called scope creep, right? Just continue creeping and adding to the scope, right? That's incompetence of a sort with regards to your you're not self-aware, That's not a self-aware. Like, don't you see what you're doing? Can't you tell what you're doing? You just anyways. So people are doing all these types of things, and I think that on the level also of me and Mr. X, right? Mr. X is trying to build a data center, and he's been building data centers since forever. He's good at what he does. And then I'm coming in and I'm trying to do something for him with regards to building that data center. I have a lot of experience and I'm good at what I do. If indeed this massive impossibility was true, which is that a significant proportion, a plurality, over 50% of Mr. X's department, right? His, team and my team were as good as myself and Mr. X, as competent, as experienced, and so on, all that kind of stuff, then there will be little need for all that crazy legalistic and process-based stuff. Because what tends to happen, when the bean counter, because this is an aspect of the bean counter, right? The bean counter accountant slash lawyer slash compliance sales prevention people, a lot of what happens is they trust process because they actually don't know what the hell they're talking about, right? They actually they don't know what the actual risk is, what the likelihood of different kinds of risks are, what kind of different modalities these kinds of things manifest themselves in or as. They tend to people who hide under process and just, oh, well, it's not part of the process, and it's got to be this, and it's got to be two this. That. It tends to be the case that underneath that is just incompetence. And
Yeah.
the reason why I gave some numbers before about 50%, if it was like 50% kind of high competence, like the Mr. X, because the person who's signing these big dollar deals, you know, one electrical room in I mean, data centers, especially when it comes to the just the electrical rooms alone, in terms of when you're building that electrical room, that's millions of dollars, right? For all those conduits, and I'm not even talking about the price of the electrical equipment. I'm just talking about building this stuff,
Yeah.
hanging it up, setting it all up, and doing all that kind of stuff, right? So the person who the Mr. X
Instruments
responsible
and
for signing that
things.
contract, there you go. Uh, the the Mr. X responsible for signing the contract at a place like, let's say, Google or whatever, they're typically good at what they do. But then there are people within organizations because the 80-20 rule and all that stuff is what I'm referring to, which is going to be the reality, and you can't beat it. And once you get past the the peak performer person, you have to then rely on process because otherwise, people don't trust. People are scared. Oh, if I do this, how do I know that I don't get in trouble? How do I know that I don't lose my job? Like, it says here to wait 2 days, so I'm going to wait 2 days, all that kind of stuff. But again, now you didn't answer the question about, or maybe I didn't ask, musicians. You do
Mm.
music. Is the majority of your experience of this type of shady stuff in the music arena? And I know that whether you're talking about any other aspect of what you're doing in terms of the academic or whatever, I know it's still music, right? It's still musicians, but if
Right. No,
but
you
let's
mean of
say
the freelance variety? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's a freelance variety, a little bit more chaotic, people taking advantage of other people, and then the market being such that as you mentioned, this person, she can go find some other person easily. But let's say in a more kind of structured organization like academia, for example, um, do you see this kind of incompetence, lack of self-awareness, shadiness, uh,
Well, there's a
moral
lot of lack of self
compromise?
awareness. There's a lot of lack of self awareness, for sure, in the academy, and there's a tendency for folks to sort of be so very myopic, very focused on their research, and by definition, if you're going to be deep in something, it means you're going to be um, it's you're either shallow or you're deep, but you're not both. And shallow uh, is associated with being broad, you know. Um, and so the tendency for scholar types is going to be very myopic. They're not interested in other stuff. They're only going to be doing the stuff that they're dealing with, and that makes them um, tend to not be aware of their surroundings particularly well, um, and not really understand or know what it is that it takes to do something at a high level that is not in their own area of discipline. That's very common,
Mm,
um, and
mm,
that could make it difficult to collaborate with folks on a creative project if they don't really have an understanding at all of what it takes. So they could either be sort of um, belittling in the way that they think of the amount of work associated with doing a
mhm,
certain kind of work because they have no knowledge of that work. Um, they cannot have an idea of, uh, if the work is even good or not. you know, I think at some level you'll still have an idea of if work is good or not, um, within a certain range, but you might not know what that's worth. So it's so you have some of those kind of issues in the with the freelance thing. A lot of that is sort of it's kind of dog eat dog, and there's a lot of and I've said this before, and this typifies what I consider to be shady business practices, and that is uh, most folks do not reciprocate. Most folks do not reciprocate. No, it could be in some situations that they're not in a position to be able to reciprocate. They don't have anything to give, you know. However, often I have seen is that they have plenty to give, but they just ain't giving it to you. Now, they may not give it to you because maybe they're behind the eight ball and they need to reciprocate to some other folks and you're low down on the list. But after decades of employing the same folks, giving opportunities to the same people, when they don't reciprocate or very seldom reciprocate, that's a sign of something, you know? And my preference, of course, it works better for everybody, is the people that I work with to reciprocate. Because I know that if I call them for a gig, they're going to call me for a gig. And you kind of keep all of the same folks in the ecosystem. And everybody's in that same sort of network, and everybody ends up doing better. But
Hmm.
when you don't reciprocate, and you could have all kinds of reasons for doing that. I'm just not going to call that cat. I don't care. You could have something against the person. You could have some sort of bias. You don't want to get shown up by them on the gig because maybe you're insecure about your musicianship. I don't know what it is. Whatever goofy political stuff that people go through. Um, you know, and that's just not. Um, yeah, it's shady to me because you're you're you you're 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 at the Home Depot. None of the other people speaking English either, you know, and they pick you to jump into the back of the truck. But then, but then when you have the truck, you know it was that person that was giving you opportunities when you didn't have any. And you just keep picking somebody else. You know, it's just at some point you have to cut people off that are not going to reciprocate. You just have to stop calling them. And then that hopefully will be a signal for them to figure it out. Um, I tend to be pretty. I have a lot of opportunities pass through me, and so I have a lot of opportunities to sort of um, give people opportunities, a variety of different kinds of opportunities. I call musicians for all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
You know, and if you're not going to reciprocate, then you're going to lose out on a lot of stuff. And now in the past, I've been more friendly and generous with not just seeing people as, well, this person is just never going to reciprocate. You know, not just going right to that, but I'm kind of beyond that now. So now it's like, if you don't reciprocate, I'm not calling you anymore. And um, at a point, you have to have enough confidence in what it is that you do, that you know that it's not that they're not calling you because you can't do the gig. They have some other reason for it. They have another reason for it.
Hmm.
And it's not professionalism. It's none of that stuff, because I'm a professional. I do what I say I'm going to do. I'm always early. I do a great job. And I play a bunch of stuff. I can play any style. I can do all that stuff. So you can't get me with any of that. We not calling you because of this or that. You can't get me with that. You know, and I have a master's degree and a doctorate and all that. So you can't. It's not like you have an angle that you can like justify not calling me. You can decide that you don't want to call me for some whatever reason it is, but don't expect me to call you.
Why would they expect you to call them if you were not?
Well,
Well,
if
okay.
well, no, no,
Uh,
but that's what people do though. That's what people do. They have their hand out,
okay.
although they're not willing
Hmm.
to do anything for anybody else, or maybe they doing it for their cronies, the dude they grew up with, or whatever it is. But if I'm giving you gigs and I'm giving you opportunities, I'm putting food in your mouth. I set up the situation where you getting full bennies in insurance. I'm the one that did that. And then you act like that cat's not even around. Every time you have an opportunity, you never try to pay back. You never try to do something to reciprocate for what was done for you. That just tells me a lot about the person. And at some point, um, people have to just recognize that people are playing politics.
Dr. Thunder,
They're
though,
in
didn't you recognize
it's
this
dirty.
beforehand,
Go ahead.
though? 'Cause- Well, because, okay, so the question is, did you not recognize it beforehand? And it's a repeat of the whole, for example, the story, that you told about you seeing something beforehand. Now, it seemed like it was more blatant in terms of the signals that this person was giving you, and then you cut it off, right? You cut off this contract situation, blah, 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 with her. And now we're talking about reciprocation and other kinds of things like that. Now, I talk about judgment. I talk about cutting things off early, seeing it, sniping it from afar, blah, blah, blah. And now I don't know what it is, and it's not, there's no, not going to try to reach to find out where I have certain ideas of maybe how I develop the skills or whatever. Probably has something having to do with how a certain kind of training, perhaps, maybe because I went to boarding school early and for a while, and certain other things, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
But I'm not crazy that when I say that a lot of the stuff that happens, you can see you knew they were gonna happen. Were you really surprised that it was this person that is doing this? Like, does it really surprise you? Oh, I mean,
Yeah, you're right.
I,
You're right. I
yeah,
think I think I like to give people a benefit of the doubt. And even in this last thing that I had to cut off, I was giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I was like, let, you know, Lord, please give me a reason not to cut them off. I'm serious. I was like, I'm I'm really trying. Um, and then I just got to it. I was like, no, I can't do it. So I try to give people a benefit of the doubt in with certain kinds of opportunities. Um, in this sort of freelance musician thing, and you know, getting paid based on networks and referrals of gigs, and people know your work and they know what you're capable of doing, and you kind of the first call person in a certain part of the country and all that kind of stuff. um all of that kind of stuff is it's very sort of organic, it's temperamental, you know it's there's a lot of other stuff that's operating, personality driven. A lot of it is not based on, can the guy do the gig, is he a professional. you know Now, for certain kind of gigs, you won't get the call unless you are a professional. But if there are multiple professionals, people could have all kinds of other reasons why they call this one over, they call over calling that one. And that's regardless as to who they have the longer relationship with and who they owe more to, frankly. you know um as far as lots of opportunities that they've been given. um I don't really expect, see, I like to do things out of the goodness of my heart, as it were. I'm not actually looking for people to pay me back. I'm not looking for them to be the ones that are going to reciprocate. So what happens is, when you have that disposition, you end up doing a lot of stuff for people, and then years later when you look back, you're like, I just noticed something. I've done all of this stuff, and none of these rascals have called me ever for a freaking gig.
that's
What the
that's that's
heck
very
is going
interesting.
on? So it's more of that kind of
Very,
thing, and you keep it moving. I'm always like, I have my hands in a lot of pies or whatever. I'm spinning a lot of plates. you know, cold approach, masculine frame, got my game hat, I'm doing all I'm do- what are we talking about here? I'm I'm doing all of that stuff. And so like I'm not really thinking about, where the money is coming back, who has paid me back, who's doing I'm not really micromanaging it that way. So it's easy to over a period of time not to consider that. But then I'm just telling folks that when you do realize that, you should listen to it. You know,
Oh yeah,
don't fight against that.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very interesting. Because it's almost like I'm standing on the other side of the street and kind of looking, and it's not a unfamiliar stance I'm taking or scene I'm seeing, because this thing, um I mean, there's a reason Kaizo brought it up last week about like this kind of that kind of like judging people, giving them a chance, how often, blah blah blah, do you experiment, da, 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 da. um it just tends to be the case that somehow I'm able to I quickly settle down on what someone is and going to be, and doesn't I then may then decide to do X, Y, and Z with them, but it's going to be with full recognition of what's, of the things that
Right.
will or will not, blah blah blah. And don't try to be surprised in that way. Now I do not I definitely don't. So I'm a fair person. After, having said all that, because the part I'm talking about now, when you mentioned the goodness of your heart, doing things out of the goodness of your heart, and then you get disappointed. So would I say I don't do things out of the goodness of my heart? I would not say that. That's not the secret here. I'm a fair person, but I do cut off, about it's like if you imagine this mushroom cloud with an epicenter and then like a massive blast radius around. Is kind of how I operate. I mentioned earlier, or I analogized it in some previous conversation, as like a spider, right, in the middle of the web, right. I tend to operate that way. That's my modus operandi, and I so people that I don't want anywhere, near at the epicenter, or not anywhere near there, even though I may still collect them at different orbits and whatnot. And so and I've the reason I do this, because I find it to be very important to agree with you that, hey, don't fight against that that idea. It doesn't mean it might not change your behavior, but definitely you're not going to be getting disappointed all the time, right? Like, I mean, you might still do the things you want to do, but at least you're not going to be feeling like, oh my god, or expectations. Expectations just lead to disappointments a lot of times, and so on. And I think that, if I were to get, just, maybe down level it to something that is pragmatic, because somewhat a lot of what I'm describing with regards to how I make these discernments is now very inbuilt into my intuition. I'm generally intuitive, but also I've practiced the system so much that it's probably now like second nature to be able to just see, trust my decision, make a judgment, right? But if we were to break it down to, well, how can I learn? Well, learning about different personality types is a big aspect of, I think, being able to see what somebody, which lane they're in, so that you don't mischaracterize what they're doing, what they're saying. Because if you know, oh, this is the kind of person whom focuses on, they don't really care so much about the truth of something, just as long as it works, then when they say certain things, then you know how to take it. But
Right. Right.
if someone like Dr. Thunder is talking, they're probably going to be more about making sure the premises and the conclusions made, they're going to be about this kind of a logical thing and about the truth of something, right? As opposed to, good enough, always work, blah blah, that kind of stuff, right? And this is an actual difference in terms of what people value more, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just saying that whether it's Jordan Peterson's Big Five, understanding agreeableness versus non-agreeableness, for example, because it's an important thing. So let's say the ability to say no, the ability to cut off, it does lie on the agreeable versus disagreeable, uh, line with regards to personality, right? So whether it's that big five style, which is, agreeableness, the extroversion, and blah blah blah, is it openness they call it? I think openness is what they call the intuition part in that one. And I know you don't like openness, Dr. Thunder, but anyways, um, or if you want to use MBTI, which is Myers Briggs, um, or shout out to Kevin Samuels. He's doing men. They're doing Men's Week on the channel, and I think I passed by and he was talking about I think it's called Cliff's Strength Finders or Strength Finders being the one. So that's another
Oh
kind of
yeah,
depending
yep,
on
yep.
which one you want. Now yeah I Myers Briggs I find to be the ultimate, but it's more if you want to be a nerd about personalities. I just found it to be matching more with the thorough understanding of the subjective blah blah blah, breaking down the cognition into functions and whatnot. So um, but doing that, learning something like that will help you make this discernment, these judgments. You may find that, oh, there's a certain type of person that I should not be working closely with. Okay, and it's not because you're bad, right, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah,
And
no.
it's like, okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's not because they're bad. It's not because there's something wrong with them. They're unscrupulous. It's just you know that it's not going to be a good experience because
it's not gonna be a good experience because they fundamentally are not gonna see the world the way you're seeing the world, and operate in it the way they're playing a slightly different game. Um, and empathy, cognitive empathy means being able to see the game that they're playing and understand, okay, it's not your game. But it's like, okay, cool. These guys constantly trying to play roulette. I bring him to the craps table. He wants to play roulette. So I'll catch him, at that at my roulette frequency, which is maybe once every 2 years. When I'm in the roulette zone and doing roulette activities, that's when I'll interface with this person. Not because he's a bad person, but all he knows is roulette.
yeah. All right. Well, I did have another story, and this would be about. Um, so this is more on the institutional side. Um, not academia. I could. There's lots that could be said about that. Um, so they're not exempt. But I've worked in churches. Um, been a church musician for a long time. Um, and currently, I am not. I've discontinued a my sort of tenure at a at a church in what was it November of 22. And though I've played in a few churches since then, um, I don't have a regular gig right now. And it's been somewhat of an adjustment. I've had a gig at church for, a lot of years, but there were a lot of things about it that um, I just accepted as this is just what it is. Though there were things that I never was comfortable with, I never believed were appropriate. A good way to conduct business. A lot of stuff very loose, not particularly organized. A lot of expectation that you will bend over backwards and do all kinds of stuff that is outside of your general understanding with the agreement. And in particular, if you're a member of the church that you work at, then I have noticed that there is a tendency to, when your contractual obligations have been thoroughly explored, then they can lean using your membership obligations. So they can always get more out of you than they pay for because, after all, this is your church. And so there's a lot of tendencies, I think, especially with certain, uh, the sort of way that churches are governed. Different churches are governed. Who has sort of the power to make certain kinds of decisions to hire and fire? Now, one of the things to know about church positions, and this is not just the musicians, is all of the church positions are what's called at will. They hire at will and they
That means they
fire
can let you
at
go at any. Yeah.
uh, and they don't have to have a reason. They don't have to, you
Hmm.
know, provide some, and you can't really do anything. And even if you could sue a church, so for you could say, well, this is for wrongful termination or for whatever. There's a number of issues. One is, do you really want to be seen as the person that sued a church? Because if it is your desire to seek employment at another church, that may be that may look a
Hmm.
certain kind of way. And if they themselves are slightly on the beyond the ethical ambiguity, they're slightly beyond that into the actual uh, moral failings in sort of riding roughshod over people that work at their churches. If they know that they are doing the things that you just sued another church for doing, it's not likely that they're going to hire you. But I'll tell you, I wish somebody would sue at some point. A real big, high profile thing where one of these big mega churches gets sued and loses, not because I want to see the church maligned or a big headline that draws, bad attention, but because a lot of these churches have been engaging in unscrupulous, um, or rather unscrupulous, uh, I would argue immoral, um, and inconsistent in unfairness at a, you know, at epic proportions. I mean, it's a lot of shady, greasy, conniving, and a lack of uh, uniformity with respect to holding people accountable for policies. If the person has a particular skill set, if the person is related to the pastor, is related to board members, then the reading and the penalty for a particular infraction doesn't have to be to the letter of the law, right? It can be, and in fact, it's a church, right? So grace. We need to have grace. But they can always, at will, get rid of you anytime they desire. And that's if you've been a perfect citizen, done everything you've been asked to do, um, and, done a good job. It doesn't matter. But, you get to a certain point seeing certain kinds of things, and you have to just decide if that's what you want to continue doing.
Hmm.
And yeah, but yeah,
You
I've
deciding
had
you're not playing at churches anymore?
well, I don't know that that is what I'm saying. I'm saying that if I am going to do it again, I'm talking. I mean, of course, people call me pretty frequently to play at church. Um, And so on a one-off sort of uh, kind of a one-off thing, it's not a big deal because you don't you're not seeing how the sausage is made if you
Mhm.
just come in and you do one. You start to see how the sausage is made when you're like there every week, and then when you start, okay, now I'm over something. Okay, now I got to meet with the pastor, I'm meeting with other folks, and then you start to see the level of dysfunction. You start to see how unfair and how many political games are being played, and you see certain decisions that are not being made, although they will argue that they're being made based on what's the best for the church or for the kingdom of God, and we're kingdom people and all this kind of stuff. But then you dig a little deeper and you find out that much of it is just basically because somebody is getting a kickback, somebody is benefiting more, somebody is being biased towards because of their relationship to somebody else. It's still all of the same things. What I don't like about it is if you were to confront them about that, it's not like they're going to own up to it, right? And because it is a church, it makes it much more difficult for people to take a certain posture against it because
Mhm.
you just look bad. You can't look good fighting that fight, especially if that's still something that you want to be involved with. And that again comes back to being willing to walk away. If you have to walk away, you got to walk away. And um, as much as I enjoy playing, the only the only situation that I will uh, return to that, it will have to be the right situation. It will have to be a tailored situation where I am not, as the actual expert in music, I am not having to argue with you or anybody about why I think a certain thing should be done. I'm not going to do that anymore. Okay. I shouldn't have to do that. If you hired me and I'm the expert, why are you second guessing anything that I tell you? Why? That doesn't make any sense to me. You know better than me.
What if the pastor's wife just likes doing the song on the wrong key?
Uh, hey, yeah, I'll tell you, man. There's, and the thing is like if people are nice people, but and they're just, you don't know what you don't know, and maybe you're not as good as you think you are, or whatever. Hey, I can handle all of that. That's just like human stuff. That's fine. The stuff that I really can't do is okay. We're in this meeting now, and we're talking about music stuff, and you
Mhm.
hired me to be the music person, and you're not going to do what it is that I'm saying, which isn't, you know, maybe it'll cost you some money, maybe it won't cost you some money, but you're not taking my recommendation for what reason exactly? What what is the reason? I don't. Why am I sitting in this room with you? Why am I wasting my time? Wasting everybody's time. Wasting the church's money. Wasting everybody's money. Why am I doing that? Why is anybody doing that? That doesn't make any sense. If you hire me, I know what I'm doing. So I'm not like like a 16-year-old kid that has a lot of natural ability that, never ran anything, doesn't actually understand the technology stuff, doesn't know what's going on, doesn't know how to run a rehearsal, doesn't know who they need for this, doesn't know how to judge people's character. I'm not that person. That's not who I am. I am, 48-year-old doctorate in music, you know, uh, tenured professor, composer, arranger, been playing in church for all these years, all this stuff. And the fact that you're questioning me on stuff that is trivial, I'm not talking about we would prefer to do this song for Christmas because the pastor liked this song, or the pastor's, his mother's going to be there and this is her favorite song. We'd like to do that song instead of this other song that you picked. That's fine. I get that. We're talking about some trivial stuff. We're talking about stuff that they don't even know how it works. They don't even know what it is that we're talking about. And I'm supposed to listen to you? That's fine. I'll listen to you,
Mhm.
but I think you might need somebody else in here. And that might sound like I'm all into myself and like I think I'm the greatest and stuff like that. I don't think I'm the greatest. But you wouldn't have hired me if
No,
you didn't.
you don't need to you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. There is a look. Uh, and let me go petty in terms of just going. Look, there's a reason Atlas Shrugged sells as well as it does, and there's a reason why a particular group of people, it's like a rite of passage for them, for all the weird future libertarian kids. They go through their Atlas Shrugged phase. But there's, in terms of the fact that the world is filled with incompetence of all kinds. I talk about noticing limits and bad behavior, um, where some may want to just say, "Oh, mistakes," or this or that. So I, I don't ever feel like I have to explain or apologize or be like, oh, because anticipating the sign language that people will come with, because it's all that stuff is just going to come from the same place of incompetence, which includes their lack of self awareness, misjudging, because that is bad behavior. What you just described, doing to the degree of, and we all know this, what Dr. Thunder just described, right? We have all had the experience with that person whom is butting into things that they do not understand, for just for reasons which are largely ego based, blatantly so, not really seeing themselves at all, how ridiculous they look, and so on and so forth, very unskilled, right? That kind of stuff. Um, no apologies for cutting that off, for calling it out. It is, I mean, in the world of Ayn Rand, it is what it is, evil, right? That is how she saw evil to
Oh.
be, and the people who don't respect the actual uh, sanctity of competence, you know, then we'll get off. I'll get off my Ayn Rand shrine now.
Yeah. It's just it just gets it's just tedious, and at least what it also shows is that they don't have the capacity to appreciate what it is that you can do, so, and it's not about having people pat you on the back and stuff like that. Matter of fact, I don't like people patting me on the back. I don't, you know, I take that like as an insult. It's like, you think I need that? what kind of what kind of like weak person do you think I am to need you pat me on the back? That's freaking hilarious. Uh um but I realize that I'm more on that side of things than I am on the I need you to, be like acknowledging that I'm so great and like this. And everybody likes to be acknowledged from time to time. Just, mostly I use it as a gauge for am I doing a good job or not. you know.
Hmm.
So that's a good way to
Yeah.
sort of you're sort of um, you're sort of navigating by the sort of feedback that you're getting, as opposed to if I don't get this feedback, then I'm going to feel bad about myself or something. You know that you know. So
I'm gonna go listen to
but
affirmations and practice some self care.
yeah, right. Oh no. Oh no. Ugh. I just can't take. I just can't take a certain thing, and in the last church uh, that I played at, that I was the musical director. They did some really really shady, double handed, behind the back, uh, in unscrupulous, um, dirty dirty stuff.
Damn, they set you up. They plant drugs in your car with it.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I woke up, man. I woke up in like a drug induced like kind of stupor, with like a what is it with a with what a hooker and some blow. I'm like, wait a minute,
There you go.
what happened? I don't even. And wait a minute, why am I in Tijuana right now? Yeah, man, they did some real, just some real garbage stuff. And the typical thing is that folks sort of I I don't want to call people names, but folks that are it's some black stuff. It's some dysfunctional black stuff, okay? Folks that's their sort of environment and they are used to operating a certain way. They probably don't even recognize how backwards and bogus this is. But to
Mm.
basically overlook all of the important characteristics and qualities of someone, any to be able to do a particular position without scandals, without drama, with clear communication, with uh, expertise. They will overlook all of that stuff. People that show up on time, that show up early, way early, and then they will pick somebody. They will pick somebody that has some flavor of the month aspect or characteristic, but that all of that actually important structural, don't blow the church up kind of qualities, they won't have any of those. They'll be running around in the church. They'll be looking the other way. They, I'm telling you, this is stuff is freaking pathological. It's pathological, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of folks, they don't mess with it. A lot of men have just decided, I I'm not dealing with church. I'm just not dealing with black church, at least, because I can't. It's hard for me to. Man, I'm struggling with my salvation. Just I'm struggling with the nature of reality being around these people. These are supposed to be the representatives of the kingdom of God. This kind of behavior, this kind of normalizing just rampant dysfunction in garbage, that that's supposed to be what it is. But but it's dressed up to look nice though. It's got a nice suit on. It's got, you know, the decor is right, all of that. But it's a bunch of hot mess, man. I just, it's just hard to polish a
Mm.
turd. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but it's just, If you ain't got nothing there, there's nothing wrong. Doesn't make any sense
so,
dressing it up. So I don't know.
so music in church. Now,
Mm.
one thing I'm gonna so there is a notion, right, that there are places where you can anticipate more shadiness and politics. Or there's yeah, so there's a place where you can anticipate there are places where you can anticipate more politics, and wherever there's more politics, there's more shadiness. And I want to talk a little bit about the characteristics that the music and the church share. And I think that church actually is burdened with two particular characteristics that work against it, right? Music has one, church has two that push it in this area where you can anticipate that there's going to be more politics there. And wherever there's more politics, it's more shadiness. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, if you can anticipate that there's going to be more politics, then it behooves you, if you're in the enterprise of doing such a thing, church, for example, to mitigate. You have to be extra cautious about politics, right? Or work make sure that it's not. You get my point, right?
Yeah.
Because on the other end of one spectrum that's created, um, shout out to Nassim Taleb. He talks about areas where e- external reality is the judge, right? Such as fixing a toilet, doing a root canal, surgery, experiment in the
Mm.
lab, a mathematical equation, right? In that area, there's not there's not gonna be a lot of politics, right? There's not a lot of politics about whether this plumber actually fixed that toilet or not. You could try to force politics in there, right? You could try, but it'll be you'll be trying a lot. And then you go all the way to another end of the spectrum where it's certain vague non-profit organization trying to blah blah blah, right? So along that spectrum, one can see that. Now, with on the music end of things, music has this additional characteristic because music has an external judge. Music does not lack in that. Hence, what I mean is, it's not just like, oh, music is all politics. Especially, like, I mean, people still know what good music is, right? Especially
Right.
within the profession and so on and so forth. Politics can't really take it because it has that. But there's another thing, which is if it is something that people are supposed to do, there's a group of things where people are supposed to just do as a passion, or is a good in and of itself, is as intrinsic, blah blah blah, right? So music and the arts is saddled with that particular deal, right? And it's a burden where it leads to a lot of abuse, which you've kind of the sort which you've kind of mentioned, right? Where they're always, that lady, for example, is going to find somebody to do this stuff and take advantage of people because it really is you get what I'm saying, right? It's like a labor of love, right? Um, so church, okay, has this labor of love aspect of it, and it also has, not necessarily so, but prone to having the no external judge aspect, right? Where it's not running an experiment in a lab. And
Yep.
also there's this labor of love. So it's just like it's mired with traps and dangers. But it's not like, I mean, like, there are smooth rivers and then there are rapids. So it's not like, oh, the rapid is evil, but the church is a rapid in that particular regard, right? It's a place where if you don't watch, it's fraught with the capacity for all kinds of political, therefore all kinds of fuckery, right? So I just wanted to kind of lay out that kind of conceptual difference there vis-a-vis places that you can anticipate. So it's not a blind thing. If you're going to go certain places, you can anticipate that it's going to be heavier on the political end. And it behooves leaders and also you and people whom are in that position of operating and sculpting those spaces to know and to definitely mitigate against that, to bring in for example, the example like in church, to bring in an arbiter, a judge, to agree upon that, right? As, okay, we believe X, or this is how we, that kind of a thing. Because to bring in that because nature being the arbiter in this particular on the experiment side of things, right? On the on the plumber, the tooth, blah blah blah. To try to replicate that as much as possible is one way to go about it. The labor of love aspect of things and people taking advantage of people over that one, I don't really, I don't know, I don't have a clean solution for that one other than just watch out for. Don't be one of those people who gets taken advantage of, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I don't take any pleasure in describing in using, or rather in using this as an example here, because and I've said this numerous times. I mean, I love the black church. I love the music, the pomp and circumstance, the interaction between the preacher and the congregation. There's a certain vibe. There's a certain energy. All of that stuff uh, I'm fond of. I'm very fond of, and it's had such a significant impact on music. All pop music, all of that stuff. It all came out of the early black church. So there's a lot there. Um, it's the reason why I have been willing to deal with a certain level of dysfunction for so long, is because of that sort of thing that you can only get there. You really can only get that thing there. And so, but if we're honest, and I've said this before too, the black church has not loved me. I am not the typical um, export of the black church. Great. Um, my upbringing, uh, aspects of my education, not that black folks aren't educated or can't be educated. Usually the preacher will be at least somewhat educated. A lot of churches, a lot of black churches, preacher has a doctorate, you know. So it's not just that, but um, I'm introverted. I have a certain intellectual thing that I that's the way that I view the world. The sort of external stuff is doesn't almost doesn't matter to me. Like people running around the church and people passing out and carrying on, all that kind of stuff. All of that stuff is not that isn't that's not my thing. I'm not an emotional person. I'm very cerebral, and uh, the sort of export from the black church, as far as the men, tend to be the ones that stick around, tend to be very much more on that extroverted sort of kind of thing. Um, and there's a certain kind of swag or whatever, or that which really is the same kind of swag that you see in the black community that seems to be um, glorified. It seems to be
Let me ask you
prioritized.
something here.
Go ahead.
Um, because I was gonna go when you were speaking earlier about the dysfunction or the shadiness of the church. I was like, I was gonna say something some might consider sexist, but a little tongue in cheek. I was like, oh, it sounds like sounds like it's run by women. But anyways,
Well,
but
it is. That's kind of
now
part of
when you
the
mention
issue. But
you,
yeah.
you know, I am bringing up this swag thing again, and I'm like, okay, it's kind of like this. There's a certain kind of cosmetic ornamentation focused, blah 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 type
Yep.
thing there. Um, you know, the so-called spontaneity or whatever, those values. But let me ask something, which is, it just came to mind because I heard somebody say it. And this person said, and then I will try to flesh out what I think they mean. Or basically, they said that the peak, uh, peak male, um, you could call it a peak male, the self-actualized or self-actualizing, whatever, male, blah blah blah, that thing does not exist within the black culture. And then mention that they
Mhm.
have to come out of the you get the point. It's not like, oh, that every peak male finds that he has to come out of that culture. And then I'm thinking conceptually, right? And I'm like, obviously it's possible that yes, that there is a culture that does not give room for that archetype, that does not that chooses either to not, or to actually maybe even deride that archetype. And then an aspect was a 3 hour live stream that this thing was kind of involved with, a particularly high level live stream, as you might imagine, for this kind of a thing to be said. But throughout that whole conversation, one of the things that I know, one of the things that I noticed was, okay, so the quote unquote person whom is this self actualized peak person, blah blah blah, kind of on exists on this peak, which is soars above the clouds, which is the community, any community, right? That to be this peak person I'm talking about is, there is a way in which you're kind of separated, right, from any community. You're an individual. You're the individual. That is kind of what it means to be there. Okay. If I'm speaking in visuals and what seems to be code, forgive me, it's getting late or whatever. But I hope I'm communicating at least. And there is a certain fear within the community, you know, or shall I say the women of the community, because that's what it comes down to. That somehow, if they let these men go reside at the peak, that they will leave all of us, and that's not true, because other communities have room for their peak people to be, and understanding fully well that they are not beholden to the community, otherwise they would not be peak, right? But they still can hover above us and we can benefit from their radiance, right? We don't have to try to draw them down into the muck and, the community, or you live in the community. All this community berating
Mm.
is an aspect that I saw, which would make it such that you cannot have peak people there. They're not going to feel, just going to get the fuck out. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. One thing that occurred to me is, so this peak person, as you described it, can't really be controlled by the same community forces that tend to control the others. And so it makes them hard to, if you want to control them, it makes them hard to deal with. Uh, and in a long term situation, I have been able to fool people uh, that I was being impacted by the force that they were applying, that the institution was applying. In other words, that many of those external things actually had an impact on me. They actually affected the way that I was uh, thinking, about stuff. Like it was like an actual factor in my deliberation, and it was not. It never was. Never will be. That doesn't mean that doesn't make me um, the kind of person or something that shouldn't be involved in church or something like that. It's not that at all. there still is a place for those folks. Yeah, and actually, one of the benefits of someone that has that kind of disposition is that they're not going to be steered to and fro by every sort of wind of doctrine. They're not going to just do the things that are sort of convenient for the congregation, for the community, because they don't weigh those forces as being primary. They maybe even only are willing to uh, what is it, endure them, or what am I saying? Um, they recognize that they exist. You know, they are doing what they're doing despite those forces, not because those forces uh, are compelling them. And when I said I was able to fool people, I didn't mean that I was trying to do something nefarious or uh, being dishonest. I just was doing the same thing others were doing, but I could tell that when other people did it, it was a different thing than when I did it. I did it because I can see why you should do this. There's a continuity. There's a you need, not total uniformity, but you need to have some sort of order. You need to have process. You have to have structure. You have to have hierarchy. I recognize all of those things, and I recognize aspects of culture as sort of helping to support that structure. So I was like, okay, I'll do this because it's supporting the structure, but I wasn't doing it but for the reasons that other folks was doing it. And is very alienating in one sense, because you sense that other people are getting almost like a euphoric kind of, they're having this sort of experience, but you're not really ever having that experience. You're just sort of standing outside looking at, you know, what's going on. Maybe not necessarily judging it. You're just, okay, well, that's nice. That's happening. So,
Yes, and you mentioned the community aspect. And what I mean, you talk about a certain kind of order. And this certain kind of order is community order, FE order, the kind of order that values everybody feeling good vis-a-vis other people, right? I look at them and I don't see, it's like a what's this person ideal world? Is the ideal world where I look at my neighbor and I don't see them giving me a side eye. I kind of everyone is just projecting on everybody else and making sure that the vibes are good. Now, if you prioritize that, which generally women will, right? Then you will not see it is hard, and this was part of the conversation too in that stream that I watched, because a couple of women came in. These were intelligent, and I could tell, especially with one of them, astute, and one of them even had a lot of intuition. But she, with all this, her gifts in really seeing what these guys were saying, could not make a particular leap to this point of there is above that cloud. Just
mm,
fundamentally, like, oh, that no, that's just afraid of that place. Like this place of that you described of it's not a neutrality or whatever, but I'm just going to use that word to kind of attach to what you mentioned about standing there watching what's going on. They don't trust that place at all. Or let me know, if I were to then make it about the spirit, that spirit of the community cannot trust that place. It doesn't. It's completely foreign. It's dangerous. What are you thinking over there?
yeah.
Come back down here and be of use. And then this person just sees themselves as you're trying to enslave me. And so I think that whether it be through the different kinds of the mythos, the story, the narratives, the understanding of this archetype, um, it's important, and it I, uh, it tends to be something more on the male side of things, mainly because of the kinds of values that I just described, not because of any particular kind of capacities, right? It's the values, right? It is the man that will actually value this thing, which is adjacent to Stoicism in a certain sense. To Stoicism is to bring it down a few levels from what we're talking about now. But um, yeah, so it's just interesting. I just wanted to see what you thought about that. We've long passed the time for the show and whatnot. But when you
Yeah.
were talking about that church thing and the guy that is the typical export and the blah blah blah, I was like, I thought that
Yeah.
was
Yeah. No,
pertinent.
yeah, it's definitely the same, same deal there. You know, I'll tell you with, uh, and look, I've loved the black church. It's obvious to me that I am not the choice of the black church. I don't have um, the swag or that, as we described it, the sort of allegiance to the aspects of the community that seem to be a hallmark in be recognized as making you understand and relate to what is going to tend to have a certain kind of impact on people. In the black church necessarily is all about doing things so that people will have an experience. So if I'm able to generate that same thing or not, since they don't understand how I'm able to access that without the allegiance to the community, these aspects we're talking about, I think it makes somebody like me um, um, hard to place. Maybe they don't understand me. They don't have a place for me necessarily, and then they can't control my the way that I operate, or, right? And and regardless as to your level of allegiance and compliance to all of the policies, all of the rules, all of the things that you're supposed to do, it still seems as though there still is a recognition that you don't really belong there. And and like I said, I think that's a flaw. It's a flaw, and to the extent that you know, black church keeps hemorrhaging men, and this is part of the reason for that. Um, and especially the ones that are going to wind up being hyper productive and um, high earning, educated lame types. They tend to disproportionately be those folks that they're exiling. That's a problem. That's a significant problem. Um, but yeah, but I love the black church. It doesn't love me. Boo hoo. Whatever. That's how it is. Um, if I was going to, like I said, find another spot, do it again, it would have to be really would have to be on my terms. And really, what I've done now is there's a lot of things I've sort of been sort of on the back burner for a long time because I've been working on a lot of other people's projects, for a long time. Just their projects, this their projects. So I haven't been working on my own projects as much. So I've sort of
Mhm.
rechanneled a lot of that energy back into my own projects, and so I've got some things I'm working on that will be releasing sometime in the near future. So that's how that goes.
That is how that goes. Well, I think it's a wrap.
Yeah.
I think it's a wrap.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's our time. Please like the video on the way out. Share, comment, subscribe, become a channel member where you'll get access to all archived videos. Support Black male media. Support independent media. Super chats enabled. Super thanks for the replay gang. Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Dr. Thunder Music, all one word. Spell out the word doctor. And if you'd like to buy me a sandwich, shoot me a Cash App. Make sure that you indicate Sandwich Gang. Sandwich is spelled with two M's if you didn't know that. And that is our time. Be well.